We are here with Ina Scott to complete our project of documenting the life of Rawley Duntley. We have already documented the steps of the barbecue, which has already been videoed thanks to her brother, and we got to taste the results of the barbecue. We now are going to interview Ina about her grandfather himself and his family. We actually tried to video this at our November meeting and we had some technical difficulties. But I think this is going to work out well because I can ask Ina questions now, which I couldn't do before. So it is really a pleasure to have Rawley Duntley's granddaughter, Ina, here to talk about her grandfather. So I will turn the control of the pictures over to you now.
All right. Well, before I change the pictures, I was thinking about this discussion that we were going to have on the way to your house, and I realized that I wanted to explain how he became known as the Barbecue King, which has, a lot to do with his character, and so that's where we'll start.
Okay.
And just for background, my grandfather was born in Prairie City, Iowa, in 1883.
I believe that's right.
Yeah, and his parents decided when he was 6 years old to move the family to the Antelope Valley. I've been reading a lot about them and about that time in the Antelope Valley, and there was a lot of advertisement being put out about the Antelope Valley and what a great place it would be to come. And so they packed everybody up in a covered wagon and came eventually to Lancaster, settled a little bit east of Lancaster with the intention of establishing a freight line.
Yeah, because that was the way that things were still transported, even though the train was beginning to appear.
Exactly, yes.
It was still horse, wagon.
Yes,
yeah.
There was a lot of horses. Yeah, and many people still traveling across the country in covered wagons rather than
Right.
taking the train for a variety of reasons. One being the cost.
Mm-hmm.
Two being that they often were bringing livestock with them. And the third one, because they were adventurous and they liked the idea of traveling in a covered wagon.
Interesting time. Anyway, so how did the wagon business go?
It didn't go
Okay.
well. So after 2 years in Antelope Valley, they decided to move to Los Angeles. Well, by that time, my grandfather had caught the cowboy bug. He loved the cattle industry, or no, it wasn't an industry, the cattle ranching. He loved busting broncos and everything that went with being a cowboy. But he was still about 8 years old, and he did have to go with his parents to Los Angeles. But according to our family history, oral history, he ran away from home in Los Angeles when he was 12 years old. to become a cowboy. And he did have an uncle who lived in the Antelope Valley, so his first job was working for his uncle, and he learned how to break horses, and he was really good at it. My cousin, who is quite a bit older than I and was with my grandfather, and he heard a lot of stories directly from my grandfather and from his friends, and they talked about how my grandfather could rope. It's the houlihan. He could throw the houlihan, and that's just a special way of roping and the well.
It was very efficient.
Well, it was efficient. The whole idea was to rope their front feet.
Right.
And then pull them down, which allowed them then to put a saddle on.
Right.
Cinch it up. And my grandfather would do that with great aplomb. It was good.
Very good.
And
very good.
And there were stories of him getting the horse ready, getting up on the horse, and the horse bucking and bucking and bucking all the way down what now would be Lancaster Boulevard.
Right.
And when the horse finally stopped bucking, he turned it around and rode it back. And he did this a lot. He loved. Well,
He just loved that way of life.
He did. He loved that.
Okay.
He loved lots of things, but right at that age,
Okay.
I think that was probably his favorite thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he actually went to work for some other of the
Yes.
ranchers.
Yes, he did. A larger cattle ranch owned by a man named Cushman, and there he learned a lot more about the business of cattle ranching. He worked cattle, not breaking horses, but working cattle, moving them from one place to another place.
Right, and just had, got all information about the finer points
yes,
of cattle ranching.
Yeah, and it was there that he met William Doyle, who was the father of my grandmother. And shortly after he met the father, he met
The daughter.
his daughter,
Okay.
who actually worked cattle with him, with her dad. And so, they were pretty well matched from the beginning. And
That's kind of neat back in those days, for a
Yeah,
gal to be
yeah.
out working cattle.
Now, my mother tells me that in those early days, my grandmother would often be riding a horse, working cattle, and have a book in her other hand,
Reading a book.
reading a book. Yeah, so she was a multitasker.
Obviously. That's neat. That's neat.
Yeah.
Well, then
And yeah,
things did sort of develop, I assume.
they did. And I'm just going to move to this photo. This photo is my grandfather, a little bit, when he was a little older than 12. And he had a best friend. His name was Ted Atmore. And I think the two of them were both ready to settle down a little bit. So they were married, they were both married to their sweethearts in Los Angeles.
On the same day.
On the same day in the same ceremony. Yeah, it was a double ceremony. I don't have a picture of Ted and his bride, but there is my grandfather and my grandmother on their wedding day.
That's neat.
They kept, they went back to Antelope Valley and kept working cattle, and my mother also told, and she's not the only person who's told me this. My grandfather and grandmother took their pay in cattle, and because they were trying to accumulate a herd, and their goal was to have their own cattle ranch. It only took them 5 years before they were able to buy a ranch up in Oak Creek Canyon between kind of equidistantly in the middle between Rosamond, Mojave, and Tehachapi,
yeah.
up in the hills.
I think if you skip
Okay.
this next slide, there you go.
This is a painting of the ranch. Was done by my mother. The ranch meant a lot to, of course, my grandfather and grandmother, but to everyone in the family. The ranch at Oak Creek is a very special
It
place.
was a lot of acreage.
9,000.
9,000 acres. Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
a huge amount of land. Yes, and it's a
Yeah.
gorgeous area.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
So they started their own ranch, and my uncle. Oh, here we go. My uncle Lawrence, who had
you can do it over here.
oh.
Here, I'll point. This is Lawrence.
I'm not. Oh, there we go. No,
Yeah. This is Lawrence.
Yeah, that's Lawrence, and he was the eldest. The second child was Marjorie.
Is that Marjorie?
Right here. I can actually
Okay.
point. And my mother, Myrtle, was the third child, and the fourth child was little Mary. They had 4 children. Little Mary only lived about 2 years, and she was taken by one of the diseases that
Children.
are hard on children.
Yeah, children
Yeah,
got.
so
Yeah.
she passed away. Now, okay. Anyway, so they had an interesting life up there on the ranch.
Yeah, your mom was involved. I mean, your grandmother was involved in a lot of things
She was.
because there were all these kids that had to be educated.
That's right. And I said she was a multitasker. Now, my grandfather, by that time, was primarily running the cattle operation with some help. A couple of the Native Americans I know worked at the ranch, and then ranchers helped one another. So it was a way of life.
Right.
My grandmother took care of the child rearing for sure. She also took care of a vegetable garden, a small dairy, and a trap line. I'm assuming that the trap line they must have sold furs.
Furs, yeah.
Yes. Just anything that they could do, to help the bottom line.
And then, wasn't she also involved with the school district
Yes,
that they
she was. Well,
established up there?
School district. It had to have been very, very small, but she was the president of the board of education for the little school that they ran, and that kind of goes along with the fact that she was a reader, before she was married to my grandfather. And she was, at some point in time, while they were on the ranch, she was the vice president of the Daughters of California, which I don't know if that organization still exists.
I don't either.
She found time to to enrich herself in a number of ways. As far as life on the ranch is concerned, the house was just really a cabin with what do you call them? A little upstairs.
Okay.
A little upstairs. All of the children slept upstairs, and my grandmother used to heat bricks and wrap them up and take them up for the children to help keep them warm.
Keep them warm, yeah.
Yes. The same thing that she did when she drove them to school in a horse and buggy. And she also did that, kept their feet warm on the way with a hot brick.
Okay.
Probably wrapped in a gunny sack. Okay.
Okay, we can skip the next picture because we've already talked about it.
I'm thinking, this is the picture that I just brought up is one of my grandfather. Well, it's actually not at their 50th wedding anniversary, but in the corner there's a folded napkin, and that was a napkin that was inscribed for their 50th wedding anniversary.
So yeah, they were married 50 years, and we're going to get to see, I think, those in a bit.
Yeah.
But how long did they stay at the ranch?
40 years.
They were at the ranch for 40 years?
Yes. It might have been 47.
Okay.
But in that neighborhood.
Okay, 40
They were there. They did have a wonderful life. Unfortunately, towards the end of that time, my grandmother became ill. Her health was just really declining. And at that point, they decided to sell the ranch to Portland Cement Company. And Portland Cement bought it for the water rights.
But anyway, your grandfather, even though he was up there ranching, he was also, during the time they lived up there, he was very busy with the barbecue thing.
Yes, he was. It's a good thing you're asking questions, because I think I have a one-track mind.
That's okay.
They were running the ranch during the Depression, and my grandfather learned the art of deep pit barbecue from the Indians that lived up. Some who worked for him, but others who were just living in the area. And when things got rough during the Depression, they had a couple of things that helped them through. Number one, they were pretty hard working. Number two, they were pretty creative. And number three, they had a lot of beef. And they began having barbecues up at the ranch in an area that was called the Big Meadow. It was flat, and there was a wood floor, big wood floor that was built in the Big Meadow. And my grandfather and grandmother, because my grandmother definitely was involved with every barbecue. Papa did the beef, and Grandma did everything else to go with it. Anyway, they advertised it, and I'm gonna make an educated guess that they had help from my grandfather's family, who by then was running a successful freight business in Los Angeles. And they would have as many as 200 people, and there would be people from the local area, but there would be a lot of people who drove all the way from Los Angeles to attend these barbecues.
They were big events.
They were big events.
And it helped keep the ranch
Going.
But
Yes.
your grandfather, I understand, was also very good about helping people if they needed help.
Oh, he was.
And he would do barbecues.
I'm getting to
Okay,
that.
okay.
I'm getting to that. But I want to say about the barbecues that they had up at the ranch. They brought in musicians, I'm sure local musicians, and so he fed them. They played music, and then after they were finished eating, they cleared the floor and they danced under the stars at the ranch.
That's
and
neat.
it was a very popular thing.
Very popular event.
Yes, yes.
Brought people from all over.
Okay. And yes.
But your grandfather.
Also during this time, my grandfather. This is one story that illustrates my grandfather and the kind of man that he was. He had gone to town, and it had to be either Mojave or Tehachapi. Those are the only two towns that are very close at all. And he saw a restaurant owned by a lady who had lost her electricity, and she was in a lot of trouble. She was about ready to lose her restaurant. And when he saw that, I don't know if this is a fable or just kind of a legend, but they say he just started digging a pit right then and there, and went back up to Oak Creek and told my grandmother about this poor person, and she got busy making all of the fixings that go with the barbecue. He rode around the area and let everyone know that there was going to be a barbecue, and within a couple of days, because probably the next day he took the meat, and he had help. I know he had help because everybody wanted to help him.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun to be around my grandfather. But they barbecued, and the day after, it was a big success. And of course, my grandfather paid. He did not have that. He didn't ask any payment for the food or the labor, and so the money that
was
that
raised,
came in,
yeah.
the money that was raised all went to the owner of
The restaurant.
and saved the restaurant. That's one of his
Yeah.
heroic. But he did many, many things for people for a variety of reasons.
Right. There are quite a few stories about, the events he put on for the benefit of others.
Yes, and now that you say that, oh well, you know what? I think right now I need to go. We're going to come back to these pictures, and we're going to. That's not the one I want. I want the next one. Okay. I said they sold the ranch.
Right.
And they lived briefly in Willow Springs,
Mm-hmm.
and then moved on into Rosamond, where my mom and dad and our family were living.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his 3 children were in the Antelope Valley. So they spent the next few years there, and my grandmother's health continued to fail, and they had their 50th wedding anniversary in 1955, and it was a big deal. It was a very nice party that they had. I don't think we have a picture of the. My grandfather had a lovely pin.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't have a picture of the pin.
It was made of gold, and it was fashioned in the shape of one of the leaves from an oak tree at the ranch. It had a pretty little diamond in the middle. You can see my grandmother was all spiffed up, and my grandfather was really spiffed up, and it was a lovely time. And it was wonderful that they had that, because a year later my grandmother did pass away. I'm going to go back now to
there's a couple of deep pit barbecues, I think.
Oh, most of those came later.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
The ones that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So this picture, my grandfather and my grandmother, was titled Rawley and Ina Duntley with 2 infants. And I just want to make this clear. They definitely were 2 infants. My grandfather was holding my brother Charlie, one of the twins, and my grandmother was holding my brother Rawley, the other twin.
Oh, and this is your brother.
This is Rawley and Charlie.
I didn't realize that
Didn't
was
know that. Yeah,
Rawley.
yeah.
I knew that was Charlie, but I didn't realize that was Rawley.
Yeah, they came. They came as a pair.
Yep. Well,
Rawley and
yeah.
Charlie. Yes, and it was just a lovely, lovely picture. I'm glad we have it.
I am too. That's delightful.
Yeah. Okay, now we're gonna. Oh wait, we have to go up.
Gotta go the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna.
There. That's.
Okay, now I want to talk some about my grandfather's life after my grandmother passed away. He stayed in Rosamond. He had many meals with us. We ate a lot of steak, let me tell you. It was kind of like hamburger at other people's
other
houses.
houses.
Yeah, but he was close. He was close with our family, but he was also very, very involved in community organizations, number one, and in helping individuals or small families in need. That was how he spent the rest of his life.
Yeah.
The first.
This next picture that you.
Well, this picture, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was a barbecue in Leona Valley. A lady who didn't know my grandfather from Adam, but lived in Leona Valley when it was just a budding community, had the nerve to come to Rosamond and knock on my grandfather's door and talk to him and ask him if he would do a barbecue for Leona Valley. They were trying to build a to finish a community
building. Mm-hmm.
And they needed some help, and of course he was happy to do that. The story that she wrote about her encounter with my grandfather makes him sound like kind of a cross between Superman and Davy Crockett.
Oh.
She was pretty impressed with him. But he did the same as he did for everyone. He furnished the food, he barbecued the meat, and he gave them the proceeds. And he did that more than one time. I remember at least 2 times our family going to Leona Valley for I
For
didn't know
events.
why we were there. I just knew
But
that Papa was making a barbecue.
Papa was barbecuing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you have another barbecue picture that's
Oh, I do.
a little more clear.
Yeah. But I think that was really the start
The
of
start.
his really,
The big,
yeah, the barbecue thing.
in the
Yeah.
valley. Because here you can see that he's in a pit that he's obviously been digging.
Yes, and I'm actually going to look for my notes just a little bit here.
Well, I know I have seen it written somewhere that he spent a lot of time helping out the Catholic Church in Lancaster.
Well, yes, but this is not that.
But that was one of
yeah.
his
Yeah,
barbecues.
This was the largest barbecue that he ever did, and now I think there were something like 5,000 people there
At this barbecue?
at this barbecue, and it was people from Kern County and from LA County and, you know, just the broad general area, and they were there to discuss how they were going to cope with the drought that they had been
experiencing.
yeah. Yeah. But you can see he's all dressed up.
Right. Yes. Yeah. With a tie.
With a tie, yeah.
Yes.
He didn't usually look
With
like
a
that
tie.
when he was barbecuing.
Well, it's things like this, I think, that got the reputation and got to the Board of Supervisors
Right.
in LA.
Oh, sure. They and I do want to touch on the Sacred Heart. That was a pet project for him. He was very close friends with Father Kennedy, who was the priest at Sacred Heart at the time, and you know they were trying to accrue the funds to make or to build a parochial school, and my grandfather did quite a number of barbecues, and Sacred Heart continues to have a festival or a bazaar or something of that. You know, I can't remember what they really call it, but it was the barbecue
Okay.
when my grandfather was here. And yes, the Board of Supervisors from, of LA County got wind of my grandfather's many good deeds, and they gave him let's see, I guess I don't have it. They presented him with a wonderful citation, and they enumerated everything that he did. It wasn't all in LA County. He did barbecues for the Lions Club in Trona, and just where there was a need, that's where you would find my grandfather doing something about it. He was also a member of the board of trustees, or I'm not sure if it was trustees, that's not right, the hospital board at Kern General. And he made it possible for a number of people to get medical care who really couldn't afford it. And he wouldn't just make arrangements, he would drive them there, and when the time came, bring them home. He just was, I can't say he was a saint, but he was a wonderful human being.
Special person.
He was.
I think the last picture you have is a picture of your grandfather, and I love the look on his face.
Oh yeah, and you know what? I have a story to go with that look, because there we go. No,
It's there. There you go.
There. This is the picture where people think he looks like Will Rogers, but this was my grandfather. loved my grandmother dearly, but when she died, he didn't die. And I think it's all the wonderful things that he did for people that actually expanded his spirit. And he was a little quirky. When I was a child, my grandfather would be driving. He had Cadillacs, white Cadillacs with fins in the back, and he loved to drive, and he had a reason to drive here and there and everywhere. But in the local area, if he saw a car with an out-of-state license, he would zoom past them, drive a little ways, stop the car, and then wave them down if they would stop, and ask if he could take them to breakfast or lunch or dinner, whatever the appropriate meal would be. And he did that with many people, and he made a lot of friends that way too. Yeah.
That's just really, really, really neat. There is another little story that you told me about your grandfather when you were in 3rd grade here in Rosamond.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which is a great story.
Yes. I was in 3rd grade, and the social studies unit was Kern County. And my teacher was reading about Kern County, and all of a sudden he started reading about my grandfather. And I raised my hand and said, "That's my grandfather." And my teacher said, "Oh, no, it's not." "Oh, yes, it is." He said, "Well, if it's your grandfather, why don't you ask him to come and talk to our class?" And I said, "Okay, I will." And I'm sure I saw Papa that afternoon, because I saw him most afternoons. And I asked him if he would come and talk to my class. Well, just so happens that the girls in my class, we had painted our fingernails green, nail polish, and I don't know why. I can't explain it now, but anyway, Papa looked at my fingers and he said, "I'll tell you what, sis, I'll go talk to your class if you promise me you will never paint your fingernails green again."
I love that.
I know.
I just love it.
And I never did.
You never did. I wished I had known your grandfather. He would have been a delight.
Oh, he was. He was just fantastic. This is a story I haven't really told, but when after my mom had the twins, she had three toddlers and one, kindergartner, and she was 41 by then. And she was tired. And Christmases, it was all she could do to, get presents. And the truth of the fact was, she was so busy, she couldn't really get them wrapped. But my grandfather would come every Christmas Eve and pick us all up, and we would go for a drive because Santa couldn't come to the house if we were there.
Okay.
And we would drive all over the Antelope Valley, and sometimes we'd come back, and Pop would go inside, and he'd say, "No,
not time yet."
Not yet. And we'd keep driving until finally Santa came to our house.
So you could go in and
we could go in and open presents.
Open presents.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, this is a special person, and a person who certainly deserves to have a park in Lancaster named for him. And there is a park in Lancaster named for him.
Another little detail I left out.
That's all right. I mean, it's just amazing, an amazing person who had an amazing life.
Yes, he did.
And I'm glad we have been able to document some of it, because these memories are priceless.
Yes, they are. And well, there is a park.
There is a park
in Lancaster, Rawley Duntley Park, and I believe that some of the acreage that the county allocated for the park in his name actually wound up becoming part of the Desert Preserve, which I know my grandfather would love that.
Would like that.
Yeah.
Well, Ina, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and helping us document this very special person. And I agree, he does look a little bit like Will Rogers.
Yep, you can see he was full of fun.
Yep, you surely can.
And we've probably just scratched the surface of him, but you get the picture.
Definitely. Well, thank you again, Ina.
Oh, you're most welcome.
We appreciate it.
Okay.